Hi everyone. Want to go over a scenario that was a real common scenario for me when I first started my HVAC service business. Um, Basically, I had no idea what overhead was, and you have to have a basic understanding of overhead so you can price your servicing right. I mean, you've got licenses to buy every year. You've got ink for your printer. You've got paper for your printer. You've got phone bills, invoices, your internet fees, fuel to put in your tank, to get to your calls. Maybe office rent or mortgage. You've got vehicle maintenance, uniforms, professional services like bookkeeper or CPA. Your continued education courses you've got to pay for. Those are all part of being in business. You've got to consider what it takes to pay for those things. That's why you've got to charge enough to make enough money to stay in business. So it's real easy to not charge enough. That's the easy part. So what I did was throw together just a typical scenario. We've got what I used to charge was $75 service call, which covered the first half hour. Then I charged $20 for every quarter hour after that first half hour. I think a lot of people probably still do something like this, which is fine. You can still do like a time material, but your labor's got to be way higher so you can actually make enough money to stay in business. So if you don't charge enough money, what kind of a disservice are you doing to your customer when they need you next season and you couldn't pay the bills and you had to go, you can't take care of them anymore? So you're doing your customer a favor by charging what you have to do to stay in business, because you're going to be taking care of them better than your competitors. And they like you, and they don't want to call someone else. So you've got to charge what you've got to charge so you can stay in business and continue to provide service for them. So here's just a scenario. My overhead, which I took a class and paid a lot of money to learn what my overhead was, but I can tell you it's typically probably going to be between this 45 and 55%. A service guy that's closer to the 45% range, that's tough to get it that low. I mean, you've just got a lot of expense to do calls. So I think it's probably more like between 50 and 58% for service. Now, installation's a totally different number. But we're just going to talk about service today. So my overhead is right around 52%. I think that's pretty normal for most service companies. So let's see what happens when we break down a call. So on my old pricing system, I would charge the $75. Let's say just a typical scenario. We go to a house and we find the combustion motor inducer fan motor assemblies failed. It takes you 15 minutes to diagnose it. I didn't even used to charge for my time to run to the supply house. In this scenario, I'm going to show you we are going to charge for our time running to the supply house. So we're going to say that you got there, it took you 15 minutes to diagnose it. Then you ran to the parts house and came back. It was fairly close, only took you about 45 minutes. So, and then it takes you an additional 30 minutes to put the part on, clean it up, clean flame sensor, replace the filter, whatever else you're going to do, and check operation, make sure it's working properly. So, let's say all in all, with all that considered, you spent 2 whole hours on your service call. Normally, what I would charge for that, if I'm breaking it down into parts and labor, is I'm going to charge $75 for the first half hour, and then I charge $20 for every quarter hour after. So that brought that to $195. That's what I would have charged for labor. I used an old parts markup sheet, so I know it wasn't this high in this scenario, which is why I lost so much money my first several years, but that's another story. But for this one, I'm going to say the combustion motor assembly, you're going to take times 2. So let's say it was $200, so you're going to charge $400 for that part. So $195 for your labor, $400 for your part. That means your invoice is going to be $595. Now, let's say you pay yourself $25 an hour, which I was not paying myself that back then, but let's say you're paying yourself $25 an hour. You've got your invoice price here is $595. That's what you sold it for. What we're going to do is you're going to remove the cost of the sale, the COS, cost of the sale. So that's going to be your actual cost. So if you paid $200 for the motor, combustion motor assembly, and it took you 2 hours, including all your drive time, let's say even the 30 minutes it took you to get there, and then everything else to get it finished, it took you 2 hours. So you charge, $250. Basically, that's your labor and then your part. So $595 minus your cost of the sale, which is what it actually cost you to do to drive to the customer's home and fix the problem. Take the $595 minus the cost of the sale. That gives you your gross profit. And right here we got gross profit of $345. And that sounds pretty good, but in all actuality, it's not good. So how you figure out what your gross profit margin is you just take the $345 and divide it by your invoice price of $595, and that's going to give you 58%. So 58%, that is your gross profit margin. That is the number that counts. Since my overhead's 52%, with gross profit margin of 58, that means I made 6% off of that call. After everything's paid, after my gas is paid for, my licenses, all that stuff that you've got to pay for to stay in business, all that stuff is paid for. This is what you're left over with, $35. You charge $595, you actually make $35. I'm old school. I started in 1996, and we didn't charge this much, even this much. And if you were charging this much back then, you're making money. And the part probably didn't cost you that much, though. So, but overhead was lower. Everything's gone up, so you just got to stay up with the times here. So, what should our actual selling price be on this job? We're typically shooting for 15 to 20% profit, or a gross profit margin. That's a good number to hit. I know there's some guys, that are doing 25%, which is awesome. I mean, good for them. I want to get there someday. But right now, we're happy with 15 to 18, 20%, something like that. So, but just to get an idea of what this thing should have sold for, if our overhead's 52%, we're shooting for a gross profit margin of 67%. That's a 15% gross profit margin. So, if you sell this job, it actually needs to sell for $775. Because when you take $775 and then you minus your cost of the sale, that gives you $525 of gross profit. You take that number and divide it by the invoice price, $775, and that gives you 67% gross profit margin. That way, you're making a lot more money, and you need to make money. It took you a long time to get where you're at. It took you a long time to learn the necessary skills. You know, you probably worked late hours. You've been on hot roofs. You've been on cold roofs. You've got to get this stuff. You know, it just takes a lot to learn this stuff. So you deserve to make more money. And that's why you've got to charge more money. So on this particular one, you know, it's got to sell for $775 at least. If you're a smaller company, a one-man show, still trying to get up to that, you know, even $400,000 mark, then you might be able to get away with like an 8 to 10% profit, and that'll be okay if you just base your overhead on, you know, I'd shoot even high. Say that your overhead's 55%, and that way, as long as you're above that 55% on your gross profit margin, you know you made something off the job. After I learned this, it was a lot easier to charge a lot more for my services, because the bottom line is, I'm not here for fun. I'm not doing it for fun. I do enjoy taking care of people and you know, fixing their units. I enjoy it a lot, but I want to make money, you know, just like everyone else. So, and that's the purpose of a business, is to make money. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. So it was a lot easier once I had an understanding of just how little money I got to keep, to go ahead and charge more. And it made sense, because we were, you know, I'd be doing just fine through the summer, but as soon as the calls slowed down, and the money stopped rolling in, I ran out of money. I just would not have enough money to pay my bills. And I just couldn't figure out why. And that's why I just was not charging enough to cover my overhead. What I normally would have done on this same call is I would have only charged 45 minutes labor. So yeah, I would have charged $75 for the first half hour and $20 for a quarter hour after that. I would have charged $95, because I wasn't charging even my time to go to the supply house. Because if you do charge that time, you're liable to get in a scuffle, not a scuffle, but you know, a misunderstanding or a disagreement with your customer, because they don't want to pay. It's not their fault that you didn't have the part on your truck, and we cannot carry every single part on our trucks. So that's where flat rate pricing comes in. You can give them a price, which we'll go over in another segment, but it's nice to be able to give them a price right away, so you don't have to put up with that argument at the end. You know, you don't have to explain to them that, hey, I have to charge you for my time to go to the supply house. In that same scenario where I would have only charged 3/4 of an hour, because I wouldn't charge them my time to go to the supply house, then I wound up losing 3%. Now, how smart is that? I mean, you can't just, you're trying to provide a service. You're doing a good job for them. You're skilled. You know your job. And yet, you're working hard for them, getting dirty, and you're losing money. And that's no fun. So get your pricing right, guys. You deserve it. Your teammates deserve it. You've got to make money. That's what the bottom line is. So I will cover some other things in the next video. I might break another one of these down also. We can also talk about some pricing on your installation. So installation, it's basically you use the same method. It's just you've only got you know, the overhead's lower in installation, because you're not driving around all day, and you know, you might have an installer that makes good money, and then a helper that rides with him who's learning that doesn't make as much money. So we'll talk about that later, and thanks for watching, guys. Go make some money.